Today is Friday, March 24th, Erev Shabbat Parshat Vayikra. Vayikra places before us a series of korbanot, of sacrifices that were brought for shigaga, for sins, transgression that were done not on purpose, unwittingly. And it takes us through the different various possibilities. I'll read you as chapter 4 begins. Nefesh kita chata bishgaga, when any individual, that's a general theme, when any soul will sin. We talked about this a little bit yesterday, one approach to that, and transgresses any of the commandments that God says we should not perform, and we do so. And we had a list. Im hakohen hamashiach, what happens if the high priest, the anointed priest, sins? Im kol adat Yisrael yishku. What if all of the assembly of Israel does so, which is understood primarily to mean that the Sanhedrin makes a mistake in its teachings, and they have to bring a sacrifice for that? Then we continue forward, and suddenly we have in Pasuk Kapei the words Asher Nasi Chata, when it is such that the leader, the Nasi, he sins. And he transgresses any of the commandments, things that God told us not to do, unwittingly, and he's guilty. And we note here a change, not if things happen. We have the statement asher nasi yechata. Why say it's a matter of fact when it is the case that the nasi yechata? And so I'll offer you two renderings, and they're both really important. The first is, if you're a good leader, you're going to sin. If you're a good leader, you're going to sin, you're going to make mistakes, you're going to sin. As some of the very sweet commentaries have to read this, if you are a bad leader, you will do nothing. You are afraid to make errors, you're afraid to make people unhappy, or to shake things up, and that's not leadership. So you'll be cautious and you won't sin. You'll be sinning as a bad leader. But if you are a person who's there to make a difference in the world and to do good things, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to unwittingly transgress too. That's fine. There's a method for that. And that's good. It's counterintuitive, but it's actually quite deep. And then you have the teaching that appears in the Rashi, quoting from the Gemara in Harios, which says the following. Asher, read as if it's an ashrei. Ashrei means praiseworthy. Blessed is, lucky is. Ashrei hador, asher nasi shalo notein leiv. Lahavi kaparal shegagato. You're lucky if you have a generation in which the leader of the generation, pays attention and is concerned enough to bring something to bring atonement for his errors. Kal v'chomer, and all the more so if he's regretful about things he does on purpose. Now, on the one hand, you have here this recognition that we look at biblical stories of leaders who couldn't give a damn about halacha, pardon me, right? The prophets would come and say whatever, and they ignored them and they imprisoned them, right? So that's a tragic generation. But if you have a generation like David HaMelech, who sinned, and the prophets put it in front of them, look what you're doing, see it. And then you can hold it and say, I'm guilty, I'm that person, I'm guilty, and I need atonement. Praiseworthy generation. You have a pious leader who's willing to take responsibility for his actions before God. And indeed, to broaden it out, in any type of leadership you have, if you have a leader who we know a certain world and a certain type of leader. We've met them in our own country, here in America. They never did anything wrong. They never, ever, ever admit anything. They're always right. They're never sorry. It's a pattern. It's a method. Maybe it's a method to avoid constant litigation against them, right? But it's a terrible generation it is. And you have leadership which can't admit, I made a mistake. Admit you made a mistake. And then there's a space for fixing, and then there's trust that can exist. But if you can't admit, you won't admit you made a mistake, then that's never going to happen. And as we look, I'll shift gears here to Israel. We're looking at a scenario where for months now, this train wreck of a judicial reform, not because there isn't need for reform, and it's fascinating that they've moved the needle significantly, where a good part of society was unwilling to address this. Now you have, the numbers are 85%, we're told. People say, we agree there is need for judicial reform in terms of the Supreme Court. If you came to my talk this past Shabbat, after my week in Israel, you heard about it. If you came just for the first part and not the second half after Kiddush, you missed a great deal, and you might have not gotten the full picture in terms of what it was that people are so afraid of here, and the grievances that people carry, and the interest that everybody has. But the premise is correct. There has to be reform and change to the balance. Fine. But if people who are driving this can't stop and say, we made a big mistake, we've gone too far. The people aren't with us. We overshot this. Whatever we say, we did it as an initial salvo and for the negotiations, and no one would negotiate with us. So it seems to be keeping on going, right? But you can't stop and reflect. That's exactly what Rashi is saying. A leadership that can stop and look back and say, I made a mistake. That's leadership. That's what we're praying for in Israel. There are words now. I'm recording this now on a Thursday. And there's a report that the Prime Minister is going to put a hard stop for the moment to regroup. We shall all be able to do so in response, I presume, to the constant pressure of the people on the street about this. If he rises to this, it'll be a great moment. It'll be a great moment. It'll be a moment in which you can say, Baruch Hashem, Ashrei Ador, that he got here. It would have been good for him to get here earlier. If the reports aren't true, then we're going to be continuing in a very dangerous path, and we'll lament the fact that leadership hasn't done leading. Leading means to be able to stop and say, even if I think I'm right in what I want to achieve, but it's not going well, and people I'm causing harm in it, to be able to reflect back and say, I've made something unwittingly, purposely, whatever it is, and let's start again, or let's regroup. That is the great experience, the great act of leadership. We hope and we pray that all the individuals involved in all sides of this will be able to rise to the moment, for the sake of the door of the generation. That's our prayer and our fervent wish. Wishing you all a Shabbat Shalom.